After death, what is there? Why do we live? To these two fundamental questions, I receive answers from the second divine version, which I have been given to contemplate. The one where I pierced a kind of spherical galaxy made up of myriad of soul consciousness balls. The explanatory details came after in my thoughts, as after every important vision. They have developed and refined over the years as scientific and technological progress in the same direction, without, of course, people realizing it. I try to explain what I pick up from a terrestrial example. It's about the video games. When they appeared about 30 years ago, the players had at their disposal only small, very basic characters, more or less geometric, evolving on the same plane. Then the games, initially focused on competition or struggle, became more and more realistic and transformed into three dimensions. The first players, who became adults, wanted more mature games. On the net, we created Second Life, where players can create another life, with another appearance, new occupations, and relationships. Other games consist in creating characters that will bring to life and develop in an environment that will involve other players on the internet. The last one, Spore, starts from the creation of a cell, goes up to more evolved life forms, to isolate humanoid, then into clan and leads to embryos of civilizations. The development of these games has been very fast. Try to imagine what they could become in 20 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. Incredibly complex interaction, a growing sense of reality. Moreover, instead of sitting in front of the screen outside the game, through a sensory virtual reality, we would plunge into the skin of one of the characters we would have created to feel what it feels like to be inside. Of course, we would completely forget that we are playing during the time of a game. Otherwise, it wouldn't be game. Well, that's what happened. We are in an extremely sophisticated video game. The proof? Although the objects that surround us seem solid and firm, we know that scientists have discovered that by penetrating matter, there are only tiny particles and energy of emptiness. Recently, I heard a scientist on the radio who had been pushing his research into string theory, saying that each grain of matter was, in fact, a pixel. It seems mind-boggling. I myself find it very difficult to realize this explanation in the everyday world. Yet, we are surrounded by activities that have become mundane and are incomprehensible to our senses. And yet it works. All these mobile phones that allow clear communication to a multitude of interlocutors, sometimes close to each other, without their sounds mixing, or the fact of passing hundreds of television channels, image and sound, through a simple optical fiber or a simple electrical wire. I can use it. But despite all the scientific and technological explanation, my common sense doesn't understand. Asian religions have long said that everything is an illusion. So, how does it work? Everything below is like what is above, as it is said in the Emerald Table of Hermes Trismegistus, very old esoteric book, namely that the principles, the impulses, the desires that animate and feel the living beings, and especially the humans, are the same on another level that what feels and that structures the divine, one and multiple at the same time. As I perceive in this second vision, envy, curiosity, humor, love, boredom, etc. Just boredom, in the state of bliss, ecstasy, perfection, permanent, in which the divine finds himself, after an immense time in relation to the human, the feeling of boredom first appears. When a child is bored, what does he want to do? Have fun, play. So he creates a game at the level of the divine, that is to say, extremely complex. Science allows to trace the stages of evolution of this game. As at the origin there is only consciousness energy, the matter may only be of the contracted consciousness. The Big Bang, the whole universe contained in less than a pinhead. All that surrounds us is only contracted and then relaxed consciousness to different degrees. Just as video games have moved from primary forms to more and more sophisticated forms, creation, after crossed the stages of matter and its different periods which have brought great satisfaction to the main player, God, has passed to the more complex level of life, which has enabled the divine in its multiple aspects to come and perform merry-go-round to enter virtual reality. The consciousness contracted at a certain level of its evolution has allowed bubbles of divine consciousness, much less contracted and in a different way, souls, to come and participate in this coming game by entering into a virtual reality glove, a cosmonaut costume, a vehicle, a merry-go-round, the body, allowing them to experience this fun. We could compare life to a fun fair or a Disneyland. When you enter a merry-go-round, an attraction is a new birth. We identify with the vehicle that will carry us and make us feel more or less intense emotions. Meanwhile, we forget everything else. When the tour is over, death, we leave the carousel to stroll around the party or Luna Park, as we used to say, and after a while you go back on another merry-go-round without going home between two turns. This is what is happening in human life. When our consciousness enters a body, which he believes to be him, he comes to take a ride, life in all its complexity. Some scientists claim that consciousness is generated by thoughts. I think so I am. They are quite right. For a certain level of consciousness, the daily consciousness of the material game, but these people have never experienced the levels of non-thought, well known to yogis. There is no thought, and yet consciousness is particularly awake. We even speak of awakening. I call this state the over-consciousness, which also includes different levels resulting in a greater or lesser ecstatic intensity. I only realize this until I go down level. All these levels lie between the fifth and the ninth dimension, the most intense vacuity and ecstasy, the extreme that a human being can achieve on his own, generally following this or that teaching. When I was called in the 10th, seen from here, for in reality this is the first. The ecstatic intensity of my consciousness was beyond any descriptions. That's where we came from. It's the kingdom of Jesus who said that he was not of this world. So the merry-go-rounds are what we call reincarnation. Many traditions around the world refer to it. In Tibet, the Dalai Lama is chosen by recognizing in a very small child signs which show that he is indeed the diseased reincarnated. For example, he is offered a set of various objects, and he himself chose those which belonged to him in his previous life. Closer to us, a longtime friend, Marie Noël, told me that when she was little, from a baby to 5, she was awakened at night by a recurring nightmare. She was a man in a rough sea. A big sailing vessel was coming over her and drowned her. She knew it was a naval battle, Trafalgar. These nightmares were long before she was old enough to learn in its book of at school. As far as I'm concerned, have a circular milk coffee birthmark about 2 centimeters in diameter under my left breast at heart height. In my back, in a straight line, is another spot, black that one, with hair coming out of it. Looks like the scar from a bullet that would have gone in a face-on to come out behind after it pierced the heart. Curiously, looking at the black spot in a mirror, I realize that it evokes the map of France. However, a long time ago, I had a particularly intense dream that strongly marked me. It took place during the war of 1914-1918. I wore the horizon blue uniform of the French army, and I saw myself running bayonet to the cannon in the middle of an offensive charge. The ground was ravaged and bayonets of soldiers buried alive in trenches appeared. Where do we go when we finish the ride? When we are dead? In the fifth dimension. It is that of the paranormal, of ghosts, of thought transmissions, of visions, of premonitions, of prophecies. It's not coming home. As in a fun fair, there are various kinds of rides, types of lives, calm like the big wheel, agitated ones that shake in all directions, and scary ones like the ghost train. Likewise, there are technicians who come to organize, control, and direct at all levels. All important men and women in human history, the good like the bad, Nero, Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, etc., all the prophets, were technicians charged with guiding the game in one direction or another, although probably they were not aware of it. The good or the bad, the angels or the demons, are each of us at different times in life, without necessarily being aware of it. The SS officer who martyred the prisoners in the extermination camps as a professional demon became an angel at night for his family and children. Myself, I probably made young girls in love with me suffer in my health. The mutual love not being shared, I did not realize the suffering I caused when I let them down. About suffering, we often hear, what does God do when He lets little children suffer? First, God is neither good nor bad. He is everything. To understand suffering, one must know the purpose of the game. When you have fun, you want to experience different sensations from those you usually have at home. Otherwise, what's the point if it's the same? In the 19th century, the very wealthy people in the earthly paradise, becoming bored, were going to slumber in the midst of the populace and the violent dangers of the time to have fun, not to be bored. At home, the 10th dimension is only beauty, harmony, light, energy, love. The opposite is suffering. In fact, the main purpose of the great cosmic game is to experience suffering in all its forms: physical, moral, direct, indirect, small, big, anxious, etc. That is why there has always been sufferings on earth, whether in the animal kingdom, where the rule is to eat or be eaten, or in the history of civilizations, which is only wars, tortures, exploitations, disease, sufferings of all kinds. Suffering is relative and can even become a source of pleasure. Masochists are an example. Without being masochistic, and overcome suffering often gives satisfaction.